Welcome to the Local Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Thrive Fuel. Now, here's your host, Jason Holmes.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of the Local Marketing Podcast. We're going to do things a little bit different this time. I only have with me today Shannon Ellisor. What are you drinking today?
I'm drinking a beer from the Beer Advent box that we get every year from Witchcraft Bottle Shop in Austin. And today's beer is from Martin House Brewing up in the DFW area. This is a salted caramel and waffle cone ice cream ale. It's called Melted, but those are the flavor profiles. So definitely you get the caramel on it. The base is a cream ale, so it's very light. It's an unseasonably warm day, December day. So it's kind of festive, but it's ice cream. So it's kind of summery too, which it feels like summer today.
All right. And Amanda Bowlby, she's with us today. What do you got?
It's an Island Citrus Ale from Florida. Not really sure how to say the brewery name. Islamorada Beer Company?
Islamorada.
Yeah,
Islamorada
from the Keys.
Yeah,
from the Keys. Yeah, it has a nice citrus flavor. I got it when we were in Florida on vacation, and I really like the taste. I guess it is summery, but I wanted something light today because we're traveling right after this. So I was like, I don't want a heavy stout.
Yeah, or a 10% ABV.
Yeah,
Right.
high. So I went with this. It's only 5%. It's great for the beach.
Yeah. Wow.
Nice water drink.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be staying put. I haven't been outside, so I didn't even know it was warm out. So standard Tito's with tonic and lime. So really simple.
Classic call.
Classic call today. It is, almost 5 o'clock. So it's a good one to have before bourbon, I guess.
Vodka.
All right. So this week, doing something, probably the next few episodes will be a little bit different. We did an interview a few days ago with Gordon Burrell, and you all know Gordon. He owns and operates Gordon or Burrell Associates, which is really a research company, one of the top research companies in the country when it comes to where advertising is being spent locally. For 2 decades, they have tracked who's spending what where. And that means things like who's spending what in search, who's spending what in traditional media, who locally, or how much is being spent in various markets, or really all the local markets across the country when it comes to different advertiser categories. So he has a really unique insight into that whole world. It's not something that really there's any type of competing data that I know of that gets down to that level. So for a long time, media companies would and agencies would subscribe to this data, get him as a consultant to say, okay, where should we be spending resources to help the advertiser? And so I always like to talk to Gordon. He had some really unique takes. He never really pulls any punches, and he doesn't seem to make stuff up. So enjoy the interview. Gordon, thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to do this interview with you today, and really just thought we'd jump right into it. A lot of times people I know want to talk to you just about what you're seeing in the future, some of your observations over the past decades. But I wanted to get into what got you interested in and involved in the media to begin with.
Hey, that's a great question. Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Jason. I've been following what you guys have been doing at Thrive Fuel for a while, and anybody is very lucky to avail themselves of your services. Well, so thank you. The the genesis of it is my mother in 1969, I think it was, sent me off to Boy Scout camp up in Canada, as far away from Philadelphia as you can get. and said, don't forget to write home. And I was up there for a couple of weeks. I came back, and I remember I was unpacking my knapsack on the floor of my bedroom. And she stood there and darkened the doorway with the letter in her hand. And she said, "Thank you for such a wonderful descriptive letter about your life in Canada. I have taken the liberty of editing it. You've made some grammatical errors." And she handed it back to me redlined.
Oh, wow.
9 years old, So that gave me the notion that I could write. After that, I went to college and I became a writer and an editor for the college newspaper. After that, I got a job at a Metro Daily newspaper as a reporter and an editor. I decided there was not a lot of money in that. So I moved over to the corporate side in 1988 and became eventually vice president of new media for $1 billion corporation, all of it at age 30, leading this company, which owned the Weather Channel and the Travel Channel and Auto Trader books and newspapers and TV stations into the interactive future. And in 2001, I decided to start my own company because I knew a lot of these media companies, particularly newspapers, which is where my heart was, and my wife worked in that as well, but also radio and television would really lose their way and need the benefit of someone who really understood disruptive innovation and disruptive technology. Here I am.
Well, that's the interesting part to me. I think you were the first person that I heard really talking about and using that term, disruptive innovation, as it applied to media and newspapers. How were you able to see that at a time when, I remembered I was there not as early as you, but early on, and seeing how, basically newspapers in particular looked at it as just another challenge, just the next thing. But you had a different message, and it really, a lot of what you had predicted really back in the early 90s, you'd be off a year or two, but the trend was always there, and you were always ahead of that. How were you able to see that happening?
I had a benefit of being with a company called Landmark Communications, and we had access. One of our board members was, this is the company for which I was VP of the media. One of our board members was a professor emeritus at Harvard, and Clay Christensen, who in the mid-90s had just written his book, Disruptive Innovation, The Innovator's Dilemma. And he really turned things around in his understanding of disruptive innovation and how it applied to companies, and how companies would often face it with their own business model and do the exact wrong thing. Smart managers, not dumb people, smart people would go, "Ooh, here's what we should do with this new thing," and they screw it up. So I decided when I left Landmark to start a new company and to work with Clay while he was at Harvard. He actually assigned that project when I started the company to a guy named Clark Gilbert, who was his protege. He was in the entrepreneurial unit at Harvard, and wanted to do a paper on disruptive innovation in the media industry. And we did write a paper in 2002, 2003, predicted everything that was going to happen to newspapers. That's all we focused on at the time. We work with Tribune. We work with Knight Ridder, no longer exists, and Media General and Copley newspapers. And one by one, they also said, and Belo as well. One by one, they all said, "Oh, this is really great. Thank you very much. See you later." And it wasn't because they're stupid, but Jason, this stuff is hard. It's hard for a small business to understand how to adapt to the new technology. There is a path, though. There is a path that businesses can take. It's very difficult, and you do have to know a lot and zig and zag, but there is a way to take advantage of the new medium, the new future, the new capabilities that the internet offers marketers.
Right. Well, so Landmark owned Auto Trader Publications as well, right?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Well, they own 50% of it with Cox.
They owned 50. Okay. I remember at one of your conferences, we had the CEO of the digital side,
Chip Perry.
Chip Perry, correct, who mentioned he never met the CEO of the print products, or who was running that, basically until they shut them down. Was that an example of Landmark taking the work that you had done, the paper that you had written, and kind of applying that real world innovator's dilemma philosophy to those two business units, or was that coincidental? How did that?
I can't take credit for that. I was an observer. I learned from that experience and with awe. We were talking about Auto Trader itself, which was $1 billion company by itself at the time. Printing money, phenomenal profits, tremendous power in this organization that printed all these Auto Trader books that you found in 7-Eleven for $1, right? And so to watch that unfold and to watch the power be wrested from these people who had built that company in very short order, less than 15 years, to $1 billion company making 48% EBITDA, was amazing, because in the end, what I learned was that if you put the digital entity, in this case, autotrader.com, into their hands, they were very, very smart managers, they would have screwed it up. They would have effed it up big time. And I think they would acknowledge that today. But back then, oh, no, they would never have acknowledged that. And that was a genius move. And it was a very gutsy move at the time, because as a manager, as an owner of a business, you really don't want to piss off the people running it for you and the people delivering you a 48% EBITDA, $500 million in cash flow every year. And this really, really upset them. So it was such a stark example of how to manage innovation with a separate entity and a separate venture. And it still stands today as probably the best and maybe even the only successful implementation of that within a media company, although there are some out there that are trying, but it's difficult to do. It leaves people with hard feelings. Sure. And in the end, they're marginalized in their business, which is a choice, I guess.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, with Auto Trader, it was, if they hadn't done what they did, they never would have been ready for the rest of the competition coming down the line.
You have to understand what happened in that case was they took, I would say but I was more of an observer of that. I learned from that experience, having a front row seat to that. They took $1 billion company and they agreed to crush it.
Yeah.
To completely, annihilate it. That was delivering 48% EBITDA. I'm going to keep repeating. That's the third time I said that's amazing, right? So they decided to annihilate it instead of ride it down and try to sustain it with a new technology. And what happened is, I'd say within about 6 or 7 years, maybe a little longer than that, Auto Trader, the books did not exist, and autotrader.com grew up to almost $1 billion company in that time period. It's now over that on slightly less margin. So if you look at radio and newspapers and TV and all those companies, they don't have the heart to make a decision like that, especially if they're a publicly held company. Oh yeah, we're going to kill the radio business over 3 or 4 years, get rid of that and be in this new business, which actually at the time, autotrader.com had an uncertain business model. Sure. It wasn't certain. So it took a lot of guts, a lot of insights, and that's what creates great companies, CEOs that are willing to take those risks.
Right. And well, and I think one of the examples, when you had Clayton Christensen as your keynote years ago, one of the examples that he gave was how the domestic automakers took on foreign competition. They'd send down these really crappy products, like they'd send a Chevette down to compete with small Toyotas and things like that. And I don't know if it's your opinion or not, but it's mine that individually a lot of newspapers, television stations, traditional media, they try to compete with a digital product, but do things like hire a couple of people to go out and sell some half-baked digital strategy instead of creating something that can really compete.
Well, first off, I have to agree the Chevette was a crappy product. I had one. And my first gig as a reporter was in that Chevette driving around roads. Anyway,
that might have made your mind up for you.
But, I'm going to say some really disparaging things, but I have to underscore it by saying these are smart managers. Right. If we didn't know what we know and we were in those positions, we would make those same decisions. But the reason I started the company in 2001, Jason, was that I recall sitting in a meeting and seeing Clay talk to the CEO of our company and say he was citing Forrester Research and their estimates for advertising and how the internet would become an advertising medium back in the 90s into and reach about $1 billion in 2001. And so this was 96 or 97. Yeah. And this CEO, typical CEO, very impatient, very brusque, said, how do you know that? I don't believe those numbers. Those numbers can't be true. And Clay, at the moment when you're talking with a very intelligent person and they go like this and they take their glasses off and they fold them up and they look at you and go, oh God, I'm going to get sliced and diced. And that's exactly what happened. What he said was, in all of the studies that I have done of disruptive innovation through various different types of industries, one of the uniform things is that the key executive denies that the number that is being pushed out there, typically by the disruptor, the industry is going to be this big, there are going to be this many mini computers built, by such and such a year. The mainframe computing industry CEO goes, well, that'll never happen. That's a bunch of crap. So that's uniform. The CEO always, in the incumbent business, always doubts it. The other thing that is true, and this is interesting, he said to the CEO, whom I won't name, in that the numbers, when I went back and looked, wound up being conservative when you compared them with the actual. That is, they were actually less. So if you want to translate that, I believe that the advertising number out of $1 billion in 2001 being pushed out there by Forrester Research 5 years from now is conservative. It's probably low. And I started the business in 2001 when internet advertising hit about $1.1 billion that year. That is certifiable number. So I started my business because I wanted to have numbers that I could use to challenge people in local markets to say, oh no, this is big and this is real. It has been a rough road. I got bumps on my head and cuts on my face from them throwing rocks at me and spitting on me and laughing at me. And they're still doing it. I mean, they're still denying that that's the size of their individual markets. The amount that businesses are spending on digital forms of marketing is phenomenal, so large as to not be believable.
Right. And I've been in those same meetings using your data years ago. That's why I don't work in a media company anymore, but using your data that says it's X or Y, and it doesn't mean you can capture it all, but it kind of frames the opportunity. And I've gotten the same response. There's no way that's correct. It's wrong. And Google's not that big. In our area.
Have you heard this one? I heard it just 2 weeks ago with a company, and I went down to read them the riot act. They were a client. It's big even if you cut it in half.
Yes.
It's like, please don't cut it in half, because if you do, you'll be exactly half wrong.
Yeah.
Half right, maybe.
Right.
But I can't reiterate enough, we have to sympathize with these companies, because it is really difficult. The entire mechanism of compensation for their managers is built around an existing model of selling newspapers, of selling radio, of selling TV. And this is great for television, by the way. Television sales reps, are being told to go out to their $500,000 clients or $1 million clients and try to sell them a $20,000 OTT package that is far more targeted, far less of an audience. And they're saying, sure, guess where that money comes from? It's going to come from your TV budget. Mm-hmm. So, they'll probably not spend $50,000 and spend $20,000. So the net is a $30,000 loss. So what do the sales reps do? Well, they're not going to get commission on that loss. So they'll half-heartedly push something because the CEO is saying we must do this, and the advertisers actually want it. So that creates that level of friction, as opposed to creating a completely separate entity and sells nothing but OTT based on all of the virtues of OTT in competition with television, which is a
Right.
big budget mass media audience. That's why it's just so difficult, because of those opposing mechanisms.
Right. And it's the same thing we saw in newspapers, right? So they would, go to the auto dealer that used to run double trucks and huge full page ads every weekend, sell them a digital product. But we knew at the time that those auto dealers were going to gravitate toward this new digital advertising space at some point. It just wasn't going to necessarily be with us. So it's the same thing that, TV is facing with OTT, right?
I think the problem is at the highest levels of the organization, and at the highest levels, you can probably say, if not the CEO, then the stockholders, or maybe the major stockholders in public companies.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a board, and I have literally seen this, when you have a board of directors or owners, in a lot of cases, as you know, Jason, family members, who are sitting at the end of the table. And I had this vision one time, was when I was at the Erie Times News in Erie, Pennsylvania. God bless them, the Meade family.
Mm-hmm.
This is years ago. There were two guys down at the end of the table, and I looked at them, and they looked like those two old guys up in the balcony at the Muppets.
Yep.
What do you say? And they were cupping their ears, kind of listening to me. And what I realized, as I was giving them I was just exuding brilliance, right? As I usually do, right? What I was thinking was, oh, dear God, I am here to tell them that they're not going to get their $25,000 dividend this quarter,
right?
Or $50,000 or whatever it was, because, they really need to put it in digital in this little skunk works down here called Cyber Inc. That was the name of it, that they had almost literally in the basement of the building, that was bleeding money, because it's an investment in the future. What? I'm not going to get my $25,000 dividend, So that is the problem at the highest levels of the organization. And I don't mean to make fun of them. They're counting on this revenue, and a lot of them are older, and a lot of them, don't have that long of a window here. And so they're going, no, I don't want the money to be spent this way. I want it to continue to come to me. Can't we keep selling the newspaper and sell it harder? So you have that friction at the highest levels of the organization as well, that complicate things considerably.
Right. Sure. And I remember being at America East conference more than probably 13, 14 years ago, where a gentleman who I think he was either an owner or a publisher of a newspaper stood up during one of your sessions, yelled at you and said, "You told us we were going to be making money by this time." And upset, that ostensibly they'd done some things that you'd recommended, but not actually cashing in yet, not understanding kind of the whole landscape of what the message was.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but it's happened so many. It's happened so many times. It could have been any one of 100 responses. I'm usually pretty good with hecklers. Not mean, but it does happen. But again, Jason, it's easy to make fun of these folks, but it is difficult at the local level. And sometimes what you say is not heard the right way.
Exactly.
And this stuff is hard. It is really hard. There are two different types of transformation that a media company, if that's what we're going to be talking about, goes through. It's transformation A, which is, how does all this technology make my company and my business model better? How do I distribute content, not only in print or for broadcast through my broadcast license over the air, but also digitally?
Right.
So that's A. So applying the technology to enhance your business and make it better. And then B is, okay, and this is the thing that just dumbfounds me sometimes. I am selling only to 15% of the businesses in this marketplace, because only 15% want to buy what I have to sell, whether it's a radio spot or TV spot, a direct mail piece, or a newspaper ad. Oh dear, nearly 90% of businesses are buying this other thing called digital advertising. Now I can sell that. How do I go after the other 86% of the businesses in the marketplace using this medium?
Right.
So they don't see it that way, and that dumbfounds me.
Well, and going back to the start of the company, I mean, it was when you looked out and started the company, you've grown tremendously. I mean, you didn't start out with these big conferences and everything, I don't think, until 2010 or so. Is that a factor of the industry just catching up to where you were? We needed a new kind of conference, or what was the thinking behind that?
You know, what I've discovered over 20 years is that if you look back over all the things that you did that were successful, you can put them together in sort of a retrofitted strategy that makes you look brilliant. But in reality, you stumble across a lot of things. And what happened, you're going to laugh, with the conference was I never wanted to be in the conference business. I never intended to be in it. I wanted to be in the data and research business, right? And license our data. And in 2008, the company, I'd say, did us wrong. They I won't go into the details, but they had a conference, and this conference was attracting 650 people at the last one. And it was all about the type of things that we do, local, interactive, type of advertising. And so, I said, God, they invited me once to speak at one of their conferences. They never invited me again because I'm not a bad speaker. I'm entertaining, I'm funny, I had to be over the years. And so they thought, he's a competitor, we'll never invite him again. And I thought, wow, they've just created a marketplace where all of our clients are going. That's not good. I, should probably start my own conference. Then they did something that really pissed me off. And I thought, that's it, to start my own conference. And I like to go big or go home. So we rented out the largest and most expensive venue in New York. Didn't bump around from small city to small city. Kansas City or Atlanta or something. We're doing it in New York, the center of the advertising universe. We rented out the Grand Hyatt, extremely expensive. Muffins are $15 each. Just a frickin' coffee muffin, right? Yeah. And it was sold out the first year, and it was on the tail end of the recession. One guy came up to me and said, I just can't believe this. You've launched it. I thought this was going to fail. You've launched he got a free ticket, by the way, to the conference. You launched the conference in the middle of the recession, and it's sold out. It's standing room only.
When it was the day after the Super Bowl. I mean, that
it was. Yeah. And so, we kind of stumbled on it, but, we did sense that there was a need. I think the need that we sensed that was different was, if you were in the newspaper industry, you would go to a newspaper association conference and learn about digital. Boy, was that frickin' convoluted. If you were in a radio conference at the time, 2009, there was ignorance of digital. There was no digital. If you were at a TV conference, they did something. So we thought, let's bring everybody under the same roof and really show them about digital stuff they can't get at their radio conference or their newspaper or TV conference, and introduce them to each other. They had never been introduced. They always thought, ooh, there's the TV guys. We're in competition with them, and vice versa. And so it was huge. That first one was just hugely successful. And it went on and on after that in New York for 10 years. I remember one year we were threatened by snow every year, which is why we moved to Miami, by the way. 1 year, every year it was close to some type of snowstorm. 1 year there was a snowstorm. And I was fearful that people wouldn't come. And somebody told me the next morning, they said, well, I really made it. The flight was canceled. I had to rent a car and drive all the way from Pittsburgh and this and that. And he said, I got here at 4:00 in the morning, and I was just so impressed that there were 10 other people in the line checking in at 4:00 in the morning, had done the same thing just to get to this conference. Success. That was great.
Really nothing else like it that I know of, like that for local media and just the local approach. So, I mean, it was revolutionary, and it seemed like I didn't hear about it real far ahead of time. For the first one, it seemed like it was kind of last minute thrown together in a way, but sold out. I mean, it was packed. It was, and like I said, you'd started the day after the Super Bowl. I think you had a Super Bowl party that.
We did.
One, so.
You have a very good memory. So I'll tell you one other thing about the conference. And you think about this. Okay, the conference had never been held, and packed was, I think, 400 people. And it's an executive level conference, so it's fairly pricey. It's not a $250 entry fee, right? So you think about that, the conference had never been held. It had no brand name, or no, it wasn't a known quantity, although the Braille name was somewhat known at the time, and it was sold out. Year after year, I put my heart and soul. I'm anal. I'm mean spirited about who I picked for, speaking. If my tagline is, if you ask to speak, you're not qualified. That sure. type of thing. I put on a show, right? And I get the right speakers. I rehearse them. I put so much effort into the program. It's got to be the exact right thing. I stay up at night. I antagonize. The number one thing that people come to the conference for is not the program. In right. fact, when we announce that we are having a conference and when the dates are, and it's usually in the summer, before the next conference, which is 9 months away, we get a lot of people to sign up. So it's not the programming, it's the networking. Right. And that says so much. The networking is just really, really important. People know they're going to get to see certain people. It's become an annual event for people to show up, be there, and talk. And that's great. I think that's probably one of the greatest values. It might not be the greatest, but one of the greatest values of that event is the ability for these people, from disparate types of media to get together and to meet, talk. Right.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some amazing keynotes over the years. We talked about Clayton Christensen. You had Seth Godin years ago, Jeff Hazlett. I remember, I think he was former CEO of Kodak. Just a really awesome program. Tell what's going to happen in Miami this next year.
Well, I appreciate the chance to talk about it. I'm excited about this one because it goes back to the beginning of the company to a great extent. I remember back in the spring reading a Harvard Business Review magazine in my office about how difficult it is, entitled something like "Why Great Strategies Fail." It's a very long article, and right in the middle of it, I'm reading that a newspaper consultant in 2001 said that she felt the newspaper industry, it was about all types of media, all types of businesses, not media, but suddenly there was this little paragraph about, this woman who worked with a media company industry. And she said she thought the failure of the newspaper industry back in 2000 was that its long-term planning was 3 years. Had they used the information that was current in 2000, 2001, they could have predicted what would have happened by 2010, which is almost a complete collapse of about $14 billion in revenue, the classified ads. And it just struck me that, wow, okay, yes, we did actually have enough information in 2000 to predict what would happen in 2010, and in 2010 to predict what would happen today. In fact, I have a lot of those documents where we were going, oh, here are the trend lines. Ooh, what if you take them out this far? And it would have been, as I had said earlier, conservative. Right. So we start out the conference with a presentation that I've given just a little bit this year to different groups. It was called 2031. So for the conference, it will be called 2032. And it's a fascinating glimpse and scary as shit. Can I say shit on this program?
Absolutely.
Sorry. You can dub it out if you'd like. I was raised, my grandfather was in the Navy and he taught me how to curse. So in any event, it starts out with a presentation called 2032, which is a fascinating look at trends, all of them known to be in place and will be taking, effect by 2032, of what the marketing environment would look like, what demographics look like, how things dramatically change from advertising, which we see it's, great new products, advertised to families and young people, big flip. So we start out with that. And then we go to a guy from Innosight who is going to tell us, Innosight is a firm that worked with Clay Christensen. It came out of Harvard. Clay was involved in it. Scott Anthony is his name. He happens to be in Singapore now, but he did a lot of work with media companies. And I've convinced him to come back and say, okay, I'm going to give people a picture of 2032. Now you tell them how to get there. You tell them that the path is indeed possible and actually what they do. We follow that with one company. And it's the one company I mentioned earlier that I think really got the formula right. It's not Auto Trader. It's another company that happens to be in the media industry, and the CEO of that industry will get up and speak. They've done a phenomenal job of driving both the core business model of Transformation A for their core company, their incumbent business, and then investing heavily in a completely new business that actually intersects a little bit with their core business, and done really well, and is the leader in their entire industry. Then we drill way down to one little guy in one little market that runs a TV station. It's kind of like the TV station that could, the little engine that could. And he's just, zigging and zagging and doing things differently. It's just the way he thinks. And we have that theme throughout the conference, okay, what's the future look like and how are we going to get there?
Right. I think that last one you mentioned is you just had him as a guest on your podcast, I believe. So
I did. I saw him in New York a few weeks ago, and he was just so energetic and just, very, very competitive.
Yep.
And he's throwing stuff up on the wall, which actually the local TV stations, his competitors, can't afford to do.
Right.
They can't afford to do all that. They just want to protect their big client base. And he's out there just pinging away and pinging away and pinging away.
Right.
So that's a pretty cool approach as well.
Right. So, with that theme of looking out 10 years, I think what you have now is with Facebook, a company that has hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap, kind of betting the company, changing the name to Metaverse or to Meta, focusing so much on the Metaverse. Is that the same type of innovative disruption that's coming down the road for these internet giants and everybody else who's playing in that space? Is that the big disruption that's coming now?
No. Facebook has created a disruption which has occurred. It's doing the same thing that Google did when it changed its name to Alphabet. And what do we call Google? We call it Google. So Facebook will still call Facebook, but what it represents, I think, is important. And that is, we have this entity called Facebook. So we're going to sort of draw up here and create other entities. So look at what, Google has. Google has Google and has YouTube, and it's got other entities as well. But Google proper still fuels the majority of that company's money, but some of these other things are kind of spinning up and becoming separate entities that have their own profit margin, have their own business models separate from Google. So I think it represents that. I think I would be scared more of, the next wave. The first wave really was search, which occurred from 2002 to about 2010 almost. The next, and Google grew to a $40 billion company, like that, faster than any other company had. So, and it made sense because what people were doing was discovering the internet in the 90s and then going, okay, well, what's out there? I can't just go to this website I hear about and then go to that website. Let's search for stuff. So Google became big, making money off of advertising, an advertising model. And then after everybody got familiar with everything that was out there, they go, okay, well, let's try to connect with people. How do we connect? That internet connectivity started out first with Facebook, with MySpace, and migrated pretty quickly to Facebook. The third wave is upon us right now. Depending on how you'd like to define it, it's either e-commerce, which Amazon rules. They're phenomenal, and they are the next wave, and they are pretty scary for the level of advertising that they are now driving, bigger than the first 4 years of Facebook, bigger than the first 4 years of Google. So the build is much faster. It's difficult, say, for our client base, which is typically media companies, to go, okay, well, we need to compete with Amazon. You can't compete with Amazon the way you couldn't compete with Google, the way you couldn't compete with social media, with Facebook. However, there is a different wave that they can ride. And that third wave, which I'll describe more at the conference, is video. There is no local category killer for video. Videos need to be done locally. They need to be done by someone who understands the market, understands a company, understands the script. I'm talking about, it could be a 30-second spot. It could be a 4-minute infomercial, a product, placement of some sort. So these types of videos are they're being bought by businesses from local media companies. Now think about that. So if a local business wants to buy search, who do they buy it from? They buy it from Google, right? Just go online with a credit card, buy keywords. If they want to buy social, well, they just put a post on Facebook or Instagram and they boost it, right? Boom, done. Now, if they want to buy video, who do they buy from? Is somebody trying to sell the video and helping them compose it? So local media to the rescue. I think there's going to be a lot in that particular area for media companies. Businesses are just glomming to video very quickly. The spending on local video production and on advertising is phenomenal. And again, it's not populated so heavily as everybody might think by 15 and 30-second, pre-roll or mid-roll spots. It's more explainer videos about the business. Right. Joe the plumber leaning against his van, telling people he's been in the market for 20 years and he fixes leaks faster than anybody can. Something like that.
Right. So, in your view, I mean, is the metaverse hype right now? Is it? And when I say the metaverse, VR and augmented reality, and where Facebook is kind of going with the Oculus, and I think Facebook's brand kind of slows that adoption of people moving to the VR headsets. But my feeling is that Apple and Google are going to catch up to that pretty quickly when they release products, when they release VR headsets and that whole VR space. YouTube has launched, VR content. There's a lot of VR games and even productivity tools now. And it seems to be that is what Facebook is kind of betting the future on, and why they chose Meta as the name. So I don't know, my kind of question is what does that mean for not just media companies, but local businesses in general? Should they even be looking at that, or is that not a threat for a decade or more?
You may as well ask me how they're going to get the pH level in pools in Belarus under control because of all the acid rain. Who cares at this point? And I don't mean that flippantly. I'll give you a clue to my psyche. I don't see any application right now. This is laughable, but it works for me. I ignore things until I can't. And so, I keep hearing, for the past 2 years about TikTok. My kids are showing me these ridiculous TikTok videos. And then this little pop, in our survey shows that, whoa, the percentage of advertisers, using TikTok as a marketing platform has just doubled. Right. And the intent of those using, TikTok next year is, going really high. I can't ignore it anymore. I can ignore virtual reality. I don't know what it means for advertising and marketing. I could think about it, and I have, but there is no immediate application. My bandwidth is like that, and it's really focused on local businesses, local media companies, and how the local plumber, HVAC guy, personal energy attorney, car dealership, et cetera, can market themselves today. Should we be, thinking about virtual reality? Yeah, but I wouldn't, me personally, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time in that. We have been looking at, product placement advertising for 20 years, particularly with, the interactive gaming. And there's some in there, but we did stop and study that once, believe it or not, 10 years ago, and postulated that it would eventually become a thing. And we had no clue when or how a local business, which again is our domain, not the big brands, the local businesses could avail themselves of that. So it's one of those things where I go, geez, it's so far off and it's a little too confusing, and I'm not going to make any money off of predicting when that might happen. Right. So to hell with that, unless I want to invest in some company that might be doing it in a big way. But there's so many competitors for it out there now; it's hard to pick bets. Right.
Well, and essentially, you mentioned that didn't the availability of VC money with all of these different companies kind of just change that landscape for your average newspaper could always sit behind that really high barrier to entry until the internet came along, and then it's every good idea gets funded and a lot of bad ideas.
Yeah, it's harder, if you have the money, it's actually easier to pick a winner. if you're going to do more than just put the money behind it, if you're going to apply what you know, if you know anything, about the industry. So if you're just throwing money, say, I'm an investor, sounds good, here's $1 million. You're VC, right? So you're just going after one that's going to be the $100 million, return. But if you're a media company and you have 5, 10, 20 million or more to invest, and you could pick a winner and leverage your current core business assets and knowledge of these, types of businesses and assets into something bigger, then you can really multiply your dollars, as long as you understand how to manage these businesses, not to screw it up by integrating it too tightly with your core operation, and then it just becomes a service bureau to your operation that you bought. But just say, okay, we know how to develop a business like this. We know how to give them a little money to move forward, and we're going to leverage our marketing capabilities, our local market, sales force, the big army of sales reps that we have, our relationships with businesses. We can really, get a pretty significant ROI done correctly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that was just a game changer. I mean, all of that money flowing into companies that had decent business plans that were then ignored by traditional media that could have been really their VCs at the beginning of this whole thing. I think eBay at some point had the opportunity to be funded by one media company or another, or that media company had a chance to fund eBay, but it didn't happen. Anyway, I appreciate the time, Gordon. Is there anything you want to tell us more about the conference? When, how do people find out more about you and your company and all of that?
Google Burrell Miami, and you'll get the information on the conference, or you can Google my name and you can see all kinds of stuff written about me. So the conference is 6th, 7th, and 8th in Miami at the downtown Hilton. We have, I think at this point, mid-December, registrations are running 25% above average for the past 10, 11, 12 years that we've done it. So that's really good.
Awesome.
Sponsorships are rolling in. We like that too, because the sponsors, the vendors that participate also offer a great deal of information and insights too. All these vendors now are sitting atop, some level of data that provides insight. Right. It's not just, hey, we can sell you your logo on a pen. It's something else. So I couldn't be more pleased. It's it's just doing really, really well. Lots of people interested in attending. People have been signing up since last July, for God's sake. So that's cool. Looking forward to seeing you and everybody else in Miami.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, Shannon, was there anything in Gordon's comments that surprised you at all?
I bet you can guess what surprised me. I was really surprised at his take on the metaverse. Initially, I was surprised on his take on the metaverse, but then when I go back and think about kind of what he said in the first third, he's about following where other businesses are spending marketing dollars, local business. Where are those dollars going? Not necessarily following where the consumers are. That the consumers happen first, and then the businesses kind of follow suit from a local level on marketing. So I was like, okay, well, he's just now getting on board with TikTok, and that's been a thing for how long now, Amanda?
Oh, years now, but
yeah.
Well, the thing with any social media is it cycles through generations. Mm-hmm. So it's literally just millennials were getting on it like last year, right? So now it's cycling. I mean, it took me a while even to be like, I like TikTok. Now I scroll TikTok every night. So it makes sense that an older generation is not quite coming around to TikTok just yet. And that's the same with local businesses, as we've seen. Takes them a while to come around to the new social media. And then by the time they do, that social media is like waning.
Moved on.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's typical.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seemed like he like myself, a few weeks ago, I was kind of on a local radio show and kind of ambushed before Facebook renamed themselves. I
Right.
was asked
Right.
about my thoughts on the metaverse, and I wasn't prepared for that question because I hadn't really dug very deep into it. I'm not a gamer, where
Yeah.
I think a lot of that tech comes from. Um, I'm not a gamer at all, and that's just I've never really been since the early days of Sega and Atari and all of that. But um, now, as we've discussed, that we've kind of gotten into this and researched it and used products like the Oculus and see the potential for what is going to change, it changes your whole perspective of
Yeah.
where the metaverse is going. And I just don't think Gordon's done that. He's a follow the money guy. And when it comes to advertising, and especially in local, the money hasn't gone there because the audience hasn't been there. And my contention is, and I'll ask this of everybody that we talk to on this podcast and elsewhere about the metaverse and about Facebook really, in my view, betting the company on this tech. What's holding it back? What is the thing that's going to catapult us into really using this technology every day? And I think we haven't seen that event yet. I kind of think that if the pandemic sped everything up as far as working from home, everybody being comfortable with Zoom and FaceTime, and even your senior citizens are into FaceTime and different similar video conferencing tools.
Absolutely. My parents are in their mid-70s and we FaceTime all the time. They're on YouTube. My mother has a YouTube channel, a gardening YouTube. So anyway, but when we have more adoption of that age range, then the local money follows, local advertisers follow.
Right. And so what's happening is you've just got I know there are multiple VR options if you're a gamer. There's I think PlayStation has one, Sony has one. There's multiple different headsets. Early on, the hokiest one was Google Cardboard, which was basically put your phone in a cardboard box and on your face. People did it. They sold it, and that happened a few years ago. But like I mentioned, I think in the earlier, maybe episode 1, what slowed me down was the fact that it's Facebook putting the product out, and I don't have a good taste in my mouth like most Americans when it comes to giving Facebook even more data about me and needing a Facebook or needing to use my Facebook credentials to log into their VR product. I wasn't down for that. Finally broke down and did it this year. And I'm glad I did. I do contend that other manufacturers, Apple, Google, when they start to launch devices, they're going to catch up with Facebook like that.
Yeah.
I was a little taken back by his comments on it, just because he seems a little uninformed, which is not like Gordon, but he knows he's uninformed about it. So he really want to be.
Well, he talks about disruptive innovation, right? And this, Web3 or metaverse, whatever you want to call it, really hasn't disrupted yet. But those of us that are kind of in the trenches, we can see the writing on the walls. This will be the next disruption. This will be the next iteration of the internet. But it just hasn't happened on a mass adoption level yet. And when it does, Gordon's going to be all over it.
Yeah, he will. His company definitely will. We've got his data guy coming up in a few weeks on the show, Corey Elliott. I'm interested to hearing about what he has to say, if he'll have a different take on Meta or if he's even, that guy either, but he always has interesting takes. Amanda, was there anything that surprised you overall or that you thought was noteworthy in the interview with Gordon?
Video again. I mean, but we talk about that all the time, but it's one of those things that local businesses don't do a lot of. Like he mentioned TikTok and things like that. Video is extremely important in marketing now, and a lot of local businesses don't want to invest the money in proper video. and like actually going out of your way to script, record, and do that. Like, it's not just record a TikTok and then you post it. Like, you want to advertise there, but you need to do it the way that TikTok works. And it's right. The same thing with any other video advertising. You need good content, and no one wants to invest in it, but you should, because that's where advertising is going. He's not right. Like, that I felt was noteworthy. The metaverse is coming, but he probably just doesn't see it. It's not tangible. It's not something yet. So like, it's hard for people to wrap their brains around it right now. And until there's something to put it on, then like tangible to see, people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, this matters advertising wise.
Right. But already the advertising is there, at least in some platforms. I mean, you know, your TrueView, your YouTube video pieces, it's all going to be video, but it's going to be immersive video.
Which you can do, you can do on Snapchat. I mean, VR stuff is a thing. I mean, just that virtual looking stuff. And if you're struggling to get video, you're going to be left even more behind.
Yeah, that's a great point.
If we move into a more virtual reality world, now is the time. Yes, the metaverse isn't tangible yet, but now is the time to start at least thinking about what is tangible, which is things like video content and where to invest your money. Like, print, don't. Video, yes. But it's really that simple.
Right. Oh, I mean, in print used to mean in two different things, or a few different things. It'd be that local newspaper, or it would be Yellow Pages. That somehow Yellow Pages are still around. It's unbelievable to me that things are still distributed when everyone has every phone number at their disposal, in their hands all the time. It's bizarre.
Yeah, they still like. When I lived in my apartment, they still delivered like those giant stacks of the Yellow Pages, and nobody would take them. They would just sit there. It's like a huge waste of paper. They just sit there because nobody uses them ever. I think I took them when I first moved down to use them to hold my laptop up, to give it a little more.
Yeah, you could.
So they had purpose.
So don't pay to be in the Yellow Pages, like,
because then you can't even open it. Right, it's under your.
You're not looking at it.
It's under your display. Wow.
Makes a great stand.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, the whole. It's always interesting to me to look back, see what went wrong, what happened. I made it out to Gordon's conference. I think 7 or 8 years straight at one point, and always that was the best conference for local advertising, no matter what business you're in, because you learned things that you don't know what you don't know, and you'd learn new things. I'm sure it's going to be that way in Miami. Not sure any of us are going to make it to that one, but I'm glad he's still doing them, and the data is always great. I mean, we have some of that data available. So if you're a local advertiser interested in knowing what your competitors are spending, or interested in knowing about what categories are on the rise or falling, here's a hint: traditionals down, newspapers, yes, they continue to just plummet, and radio too. Radio and television. I mean, television's hung on a little better, but radio's just in the toilet when it comes to spend. That's what your competitors are doing, but we can give you a better picture of really what that means depending on what business you're in. And then if you look at that, we can all see why broadcast and radio are so far down, right? Because every new vehicle that drives off of a new car lot has CarPlay and Android Auto built right into it, not to mention satellite radio, which is my contention. Satellite radio is going to eventually go away.
I agree.
And probably never. Well, it's never going to turn a profit. It's just too expensive.
Yeah.
And people won't pay for it. I mean, I had it in my new vehicle last year, had the freebie for like 6 months and didn't even know it. Never used it. Never even thought about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think I know there's some diehards that love it, but it's just gonna go by the wayside. But OTT continuing to grow, your opportunities for audience, and then as things change and we're able to segment those audiences and add more data or add targeting data to OTT, it's becoming a stronger and stronger play. So that really came out of that interview as well. So enjoyed that. I don't know, anything else, guys? What's that?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we covered the high points.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to keep this one short. Thanks everybody for listening. And we'll be back here. I think we're going to take a week off, but we'll be back after that with another interview, and we will go from there. So thanks for tuning in.